This is CBC Here and Now.
Sea Rose suspension. The Offshore Petroleum Board shuts down the offshore platform.
Marijuana addiction. One user fears it'll ruin lives.
Absolutely, marijuana is an addictive substance.
Team NL is sweeping its way to victory at the National Championships.
Yet another system moving in tonight and through the day on Thursday. Significant snow for parts of central western Newfoundland. Another mix in the east. We'll have a timeline coming up.
Well, there's big news tonight in our offshore. The board that regulates the oil sector has ordered the Sea Rose to suspend all oil production activities.
And in doing so, the CNLOPB has said it lacks confidence in the operator's ability to respond to an emergency situation. Terry Roberts is following that story and joins us now live from the newsroom. So Terry, what's going on here?
Well, Carolyn, this came as a big surprise today. One of our 4 producing oil fields and its 37,000 barrels of oil every day has been shut down by the Petroleum Board. The Sea Rose is a production and storage vessel and is operated by Husky Energy. Last March, an iceberg came within a half a kilometer of the vessel, 463 meters to be exact. This is within the vessel's ice exclusion zone, which means it has to disconnect and sail away. This did not happen, and at one point the crew were ordered to muster and brace for impact.
We now have in hand the report, the findings from the preliminary report of our inquiry, and those findings have given the board cause for concern and lack of confidence that the operator will adhere to its emergency response plans.
There were 84 people on board and upwards of 340,000 barrels of crude at the time. Fortunately, the iceberg did not make contact with the Sea Rose or its subsea infrastructure. There were no injuries, no environmental impact, and no damage to the facility. But the board has determined there are serious issues respecting Husky's ice safety management. Prior to this, Tessier said the Sea Rose had a stellar safety record.
So Terry, how long could this suspension last?
Well, that's completely up to Husky, really. I'll let Scott Tessier explain.
At this point, the operator needs to come in and convince us that they take these findings seriously and to rebuild our confidence that they are capable of safe and environmentally responsible operation.
So what is Husky saying about all of this?
Well, I did get a brief statement from a spokesperson today saying they will be issuing a news release. So far, no word from Husky Energy. Reporting live from the newsroom, I'm Terry Roberts for CBC.
Well, still with oil at sea, the federal government says it will clean up all the remaining oil inside the Manolis L wreck. Today, it announced the first step in that process. Here Now's Garrett Berry reports.
The regular person has been very concerned, and the regular person will be really happy about this.
At last, oil from the 1985 sunken wreck of the Manolis L will be removed, ending the threat of a major spill at the bottom of the sea and major damage to Notre Dame Bay.
It would have been the eradication of the fishing industry in that area. Tourism would have taken a major hit. Both of those industries alone, for Change Islands, Fogo Island, the northeast of Newfoundland, even towards Bonavista, it would have been an absolute disaster for years to come. So we knew the permanent solution had to have been that the bulk removal of this oil had to take place.
About 125,000 liters of oil are on board. Oil started leaking from the boat in 2013. A cofferdam collector was installed, but for some, that wasn't enough.
It's been a cloud. It's been we know it's there. The constant, people see things. People see oil. They see the oil birds. They've had oil on their nets and their gear. They don't fish in that area anymore. They don't put their crab nets or crab pots or their gill nets or anything out in that area. The fishermen don't, because if the oil gets on there, they ruin their gear. They lose that. That's money gone.
Just over 1 year ago, a $6 million assessment recommended oil be removed. So today, the federal government said they'll look for a company to do just that, get into the tanks and suck the oil out.
But you would see, either remotely operated vehicles or divers working with specialized equipment on the wreck. So this is not, this is a very specialized skill. There are not a lot of people around the world who have this skill. We'll bring that in, and I think that'll we will be able to get the recoverable oil out of that wreck.
Exact costs for the operation aren't known yet. Scott Sims says government is spending millions each year just to tend to the wreck. Another reason to get going as soon as possible. Government hopes removal will start this summer. Garrett Berry, CBC News, Gander.
The Manolis L was carrying a reported 500 tons of fuel when it ran aground on Blowhard Rock in 1985. It took 2 days for the massive Liberian ship, nearly the length of a Canadian football field, to sink. In the 3 decades since, sporadic leaks, storm surges, and a deteriorating hull have posed a massive threat to Notre Dame Bay. Concerned local residents have long protested the controversial shipwreck, voicing concerns about a potential oil spill. A group calling itself the Manolis L Cleanup Effort is urging anyone who spots oil in the area or oiled birds to report the sighting to the Canadian Coast Guard's Environmental Emergencies Hotline.
There were some tense moments at St. John's Airport this morning. The air traffic control tower was evacuated just after 10 o'clock this morning due to high carbon monoxide levels. Arriving and departing flights were on hold for about 15 minutes while tower employees were moved to an alternate location. Members of the fire department and airport authorities' emergency response team were called in. They quickly determined that gas was coming from a malfunctioning boiler. It was shut down and firefighters opened all doors, placing ventilation units near the exits to help air out the building.
We received a call for a carbon monoxide detector going off. On arrival, the carbon monoxide levels were high, so we evacuated the building. And it seems to be from a boiler which they were working on earlier today. We have all that shut down, but now we have to reduce the readings in the building so it's safe for everybody to go back in and work again.
Anybody injured or have to be treated?
No, nobody treated or injured.
Well, the young man who survived a harrowing ordeal earlier this month has been released from hospital. 24-year-old Blake Williams suffered frostbite to his feet and hands after spending more than an hour trying to rescue his uncle from Mobile Big Pond. 2 weeks ago, the snowmobile they were on went through the ice on the southern shore. Williams managed to get himself out of the water, but his uncle, 45-year-old Maurice Jordan, was not able to get out. Williams tried unsuccessfully to pull him to safety, but eventually had to leave him to go to get help. He told Here and Now from his hospital bed that it was a difficult decision.
Get back up out of it. Try to get him up again and again, probably over like another 30 or 40 times. I just didn't have the strength, and he was losing energy. He could barely keep himself up. I couldn't lift him up. So I told him that I loved him and that I miss him.
Williams had to remove most of his wet clothing and walked more than 2 kilometers. And that's where he was discovered by a passerby. He was airlifted to hospital where he spent the last 2 weeks before being released earlier today. Residents of Deer Lake were watching the Humber River closely today as water levels fluctuated. Here now's Peter Cowan is tonight. Peter?
Well, Debbie, we're right down near the river here, and you probably can't hear it on the microphone, but you can hear the ice as it comes down the river and it grinds up against the ice and grinds up against the bank. And that's been one of the big concerns for residents that live just on the other side of the river here, because that bank has been eroding away and the water levels are still high, which has a lot of people doing whatever they can to try and prepare. That means doing things to be ready for an evacuation in case one is called.
Then we put another marker in. Mainly got most of things up off the basement floor. Obviously, if the water was going to come in, I think the main part of our house would be the basement, which is an unfinished basement. We live near the river, so we expect water, obviously, but the sub pumps are taking care of the water, and so far we're in the clear.
Now, the big question, of course, is Is the water level going to go down? And one person who's been watching this closely is the mayor of Deer Lake. Dean Ball is here with us live. So you were up in a helicopter just late this afternoon having a look at the river. What did you see?
Well, behind us we have roughly 27 kilometers of slab ice like we're seeing here tonight. That's moving now. That's not stuff has stopped. That stuff is heading this way. And I guess as you've heard earlier today, the lake has dropped by 2.5 inches. The river has dropped about 1.75 inches. But with this ice heading this way, this could change in, sometime tomorrow. This could change again.
So I guess the concern is the ice could increase the amount that you're seeing in the damming at the mouth of the river.
Absolutely. And what we'd like to see some heavy wind to take this ice, that's pack ice that's out in the lake and the river, and move this down the river. But without a strong wind now, we're not going to see that happen.
So what does that mean for residents?
Well, right now we're going to leave the evacuation order in place. We can act on a minute's notice. Everything is in place, ready to go. So we can act very quickly. We're monitoring this throughout the night. And I guess as what we chatted about earlier, the conditions on Pine Tree Drive has changed today considerably. We've lost a lot more ground there today. The new poles that we put in yesterday are now are jeopardized, and looks like we may have to move them again. So it's a waiting game for us. It's not easy to watch, but unfortunately we have to, just as a wait and see game for us now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Peter.
Now, of course, it's not just Deer Lake that's dealing with this issue. Of course, the community of Trout River, well, they were busy protecting their school. And we'll show you what that looks like, because it took some contractors and a fair amount of work in order to try and move the river, get it diverted away from the school because it was eroding the bank, and brought in some rock in order to try and stabilize it. The school board says a structural engineer has been brought in order to try and assess the building, and they'll make sure that everything is safe in the surrounding property before students are allowed to go back to school. Now, there are still communities that are completely cut off in the Bay of Islands area, and that's where the CBC's Jeremy Eaton was today. He took a helicopter to visit one of them. Jeremy, what did you see?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear you, Peter. Now, surprisingly well, I spent most of the day at the York Harbour Town Hall, where people were making the best of the bad situation. Lots of carrying on, lots of laughs and lots of smiles. Smiles that got even bigger when the area's MHA brought in a ton of Mary Brown's chicken.
Saturday wasn't too bad because we know it was raining and mild, but nobody didn't think that it was going to be this bad, right? So Sunday was the worst. When we had to get everything in place and get everything on the go, that was the hard day.
It's been wonderful to see the two towns pull together, everyone helping out everybody. I mean, it's been a rough situation. I mean, we're cut off from Corner Brook, so that's our lifeline, is our road. We don't have no cell phone service or anything like that. So, I mean, if we lose our power and stuff, then we're really cut off. So, but we've been doing okay. This is really the first time that both towns have ever declared a state of emergency where we've been completely cut off. We've had choppers running for 2 days now. We had a vessel yesterday, part of Coast Guard Auxiliary, where they transported people and bought supplies back to the two towns, bread and milk, and actually furnace oil too, because people were running out of that too as well.
We were at a lot of stock for a bit there because on Saturday everyone bought up everything when they knew the road was washed out. So we sold out of fresh milk and hags and bread and potatoes quick. But yesterday we got a boatload down, so we're doing okay now.
But we had fun.
What do you mean, how are you having fun? How are you guys coping here in the communities of York and Lark Harbour?
We have had a lot of laughs, and we had a lot of good times too, and that's pretty good.
How much chicken did they bring?
When you get people cut off here, it's an appreciation. It's an appreciation from me for the work that they've been doing since Saturday. A lot of times when you get the volunteers come together, some of them with 4 or 5 hours sleep, you just want to come back and say, listen, thank you very much. Thank you. This is a great opportunity for me as the member and for a person who has a home in the area, that just to say thank you. And just for the record, the chicken is my treat. This is not a government treat. This is Eddie Joyce's treat.
Well, so in the past we had 2 culverts here. One was a 36 and one was a 2.4 meter, and we put in an additional 2.4 meter now, you know, in case we get a future event the same as this weekend with the water flows. Well, we're really hopeful that within the next 12 hours or so we'll be able to open this road. It'll still be a slowdown. There'll still be caution, but you know, we're making very significant progress.
As you're seeing here today, the people in the York Harbour and Lark Harbour came together. They helped so much, and they're very patient. They're very understanding, and they're a group of people that when their tragedy strikes, as they did last year, that they all come together. And this is another time. They're anxious to get their road open, but they understand. They take a time. They want it done right. And I know you've seen here today all the people that volunteered, the mayors and the council and the staff and everything. And I just got to say thank you to them all and to all the groups that chipped in. And we'll get it done.
We're Newfoundland and Labradorians, so it happens all over, right? So I can't see it not happening somewhere else, you know. We came together, well, we was always together, I guess, but since this happened, we done fairly good.
So another area of concern is, of course, Marble Mountain, and that's where I'm standing here tonight. Now, in about an hour's time, maybe a little over an hour, Lord's Stanley's Cup is going to come down that run there behind me. Now, I chatted to 2 local skiers who are going to be accompanying the Cup, and they're pretty excited. So the crews at Marble Mountain were working very hard this week to get that run ready, because with the Cup coming down the hill, that kicks off Hockey Day in Canada, which is in Corner Brook this year. Now, not a bad turnaround considering the brutal flooding that ripped into the mountain this weekend and caused a lot of damage. Now, Marble says it will reopen tomorrow morning with chairlifts for the Newfie Bullet, that's a small quad, and the Magic Carpet starting at 10 a.m. The Jigger, Cruiser, and Broadway runs will all be open. Now, as for you ski bunnies, those after dark ski bunnies, the first night ski of the season is set for Friday. So while the crews are working on the lower slopes here behind me, and there is activity going on now, the upper part of the mountain is still pretty bare, so they're going to need a lot of natural snow, God willing, and some man-made or human-made snow. And in order to get that, you need cold temperatures. So Ryan, is there any cold temperatures in the forecast for the skiers and snowboarders here in Western Newfoundland?
Yes, the good news is there is, Jeremy, and thanks very much for that report. Great stuff there today. And we do have, yes, some snow, but 5, more likely closer to 10 centimeters on the way for Corner Brook and Marble Mountain tonight, and those temperatures remaining near freezing. Bit of a cool down as we work towards the weekend, even a little bit more snow for the weekend time period. And we're going to update your forecast in full detail in just a couple of minutes. I do want to take this opportunity, because we've been talking about the Humber, to update those river levels. We were talking to Dean Ball there just a moment ago. He talked about the fact that some of those levels are coming down, and we're seeing the proof of that as we zoom into the Reedville observation there. You can see where there was a little bit of fluctuation yesterday based on some of the ice that, again, has been causing some of that rising and falling on the river, but definitely a drop here over the last day or so. So some good news there. We come down the river towards Deer Lake and the generating station there. Again, it looks like things have crested. Definitely a downward trend here over the last 12 hours or so. So some good news there. And we come all the way back down now, closer to the Humber Village Bridge, and you can see where it also appears that the river has crested here. So some good news as we look at those stations over the past 12 to 24 hours that things are coming down. Still some concern, as Dean mentioned, about the ice that's upstream and how much damming is going on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that situation and how ice jams work in just a couple of minutes.
Okay. Well, we're still going to talk about ice right here, though, the
Yes.
sporting kind.
Yes, some young Newfoundland curlers we told you about last week are turning heads at a national championship.
Team Glynn went into the Canadian Junior Championship in Quebec this week as the underdogs. The competition is for curlers under the age of 21, but all the players on Team Glynn are under 17.
And that makes them some of the youngest players on the ice.
I don't feel there's a lot of pressure. It's just we're going up there hoping to do well. We're not going up there with the idea we have to win. We take it one game at a time and see where that gets us.
Well, that approach is certainly paying off for leader Mackenzie Glynn and her teammates Katie Follett, Sarah Chater, and Camille Burt. They tied for first place in the preliminary round pool and are now headed to the championship round, which did begin today. They just finished playing against New Brunswick, but unfortunately, 5-3 loss to NB.
Oh, that is unfortunate. As for the boys team, they are 3 and 3 rather, after preliminary competition.
And that means Daniel Bruce and his teammates Ryan McNeil, Lambsworth, Andrew Bruce, and Nathan King are off to the championship round. They face Nova Scotia tonight. Good luck.
Yes.
Oh. Some great curlers,
Yes.
up-and-coming curlers. That bodes well for the future of curling here.
Good luck tonight.
Benefiting from obituaries, a lawyer goes to court to stop a website from profiting off people's grief.
St. John's lawyer is launching a class action lawsuit against a website that posts obituaries without permission. Last week, we spoke with a grieving mother who found the obituary she wrote for her 22-year-old son posted on the site afterlife.co. Now, the website posts obituaries and photos of the deceased from right across Canada. It also sells sympathy flowers and virtual animated candles. Raylene Manning-Puttester says she was shocked to see her son on the website.
Our children are gone, we're trying to survive, and you are using our grief to make money. It's absolutely disturbing and highly disgusting.
So some strong words there, a lot of emotion, a lot of anger, and as St. John's lawyer Aaron Best found out, Puttester is just one of many grief-stricken parents and families discovering their loved ones' obituaries on that website, and she joins me now. So, Aaron, what do you think about a website that collects and posts obituaries?
Well, I think initially that if they don't have the consent of the person who wrote the obituary and took any photo that might accompany the obituary, that it's copyright infringement.
Right, and you've been getting lots of phone calls from people about this, right?
I have actually, yeah, I've also gotten a lot of emails, and we've been trying to keep up with responding to them, and I have responded to many, but I think the floodgates have pretty much opened now.
And a lot of emotion attached to this. What are people saying when they call you up?
People are very upset, generally, almost everyone. People are telling me stories about their children who have passed, whose pictures are up on the site, and the obituaries that they've written, very heartfelt works that have been posted without their consent. You know, friends, parents. A particular trend I notice is people who contact me have had a loved one who's passed away very recently, and the obituary and photo is up on the site. It seems to have been posted in some cases as early as a day after, or a couple of days after the obituary was written. So that's an issue, and people are very upset about it.
You mentioned copyright infringement. Is that what this boils down to?
That is what this boils down to. So what that means is that when you write a piece of text, or if you take a photo, then you are essentially the author of a literary work or an artistic work under the Copyright Act. In order for it to qualify for copyright protection, it has to have a sufficient degree of originality, but in most of these cases, the obituaries and certainly the photos do have that sufficient degree of originality to qualify for copyright protection. And therefore, if someone then uses that piece of text, so copies it and uses it somewhere else without permission, or the photograph, then you have an instance of copyright infringement. Under the Copyright Act, you can elect to claim for statutory damages, and the Act provides a range for those damages, which is $500 to $20,000 per work infringed for a commercial infringement such as this one.
So is that what you're looking for in all of this, that financial compensation for the copyright infringement?
Well, not just that. So right now in our class action as issued, we have requested injunctive relief as well, so that they take down the infringing portions from the website. We'll see what happens, but what some people actually want at this stage is an apology as well. So.
I mean, it's one thing to post obituaries. It's kind of another thing to then sell products associated with those obituaries, with the sympathy flowers and those virtual candles. Does that part of it play into this at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will play in simply because everyone finds that to be pretty much unpalatable, especially the bereaved.
All right, Aaron Best, thank you so much for coming in.
Quite welcome.
There are high water levels on the Humber River, high enough to take someone's dock for a ride. Ice is the culprit now. After the break, Ryan explains how ice jams are able to hold back so much water.
residents who live along the river here in Deer Lake have said this is really unusual to see this sort of water this time of year. It's something they normally see only in the spring. So, Ryan, I'm hoping you can explain for us, why are we seeing these sort of flooding conditions now?
Well, it's a great question, Peter, and what we're going to do is zoom into where you're standing and a little bit further. In fact, of course, the Humber is massive, and we had all that weekend rain, and we'll zoom into, of course, this is the entire Humber River basin here, and all the mountains and hills. Of course, we had all that runoff from the huge snowpack, the heavy rainfall, and the temperatures into the teens. Now that is all filtered into the Humber River itself and down to the Birchie Basin. This is all still full of water, which is now running down the Humber. And what happens, of course, when we have this big cool down, we start to get these ice jams. And typically anywhere along the Humber, especially where it wanders and turns, we can see that ice starting to jam up. And what happens is, not only do you get the ice jam at the surface, but the cold temperatures aloft help to super cool the water, and essentially what we get is that frazzle ice, or the slush that you see running down on top of the river. But when that slushy frazzle ice hits these ice jams, it actually sinks down in below the river, and it also helps to jam up that water, and the water backs up, and these, of course, ice jams can happen in multiple locations, so it's hard to pinpoint exactly how many ice jams there are. And of course, they're very hard to predict as to when they're going to let go. And when they do let go, of course, a lot of water can then flood in all at once down the river. So these are what these ice jams are what officials are still concerned about over the next couple of days until that river really starts to drop off, because as those ice jams do let go, we could see some of those water levels fluctuating over the next couple of days. So keeping a very close eye, of course, on the mighty Humber. Now, in terms of the forecast, well, we're talking about special weather statements just to the east of this area, though the Humber and Corner Brook will see some of those higher snowfall totals in the 10-centimeter range, not out of the question as we roll through the next 24 hours or so. Snowfall warnings are in effect for the southwest coast, and again, those special weather statements extend up into central parts of Newfoundland, where we're looking at 10 to as much as 15 centimeters of snow. As I mentioned, the Humber, Corner Brook likely closer to 10 centimeters, closer to 5 right along that west coast, and the best chance of north of 15 centimeters will be along that southwest coast. For the Avalon, the Burin Peninsula's not looking at much in the way of snow at all. A little bit of flurry action, possibility of some patchy freezing drizzle, an ice pellet or two, and then over to some showers. But even those showers won't really be all that steady, in that trace to as much as 5-millimeter range. There's the system still well back to the south. It's been dropping snow across Nova Scotia and southern New Brunswick today, and it will track in as we roll through the overnight hours tonight, although I think the Avalon really not into the flurry action until early tomorrow morning. Steady snow on the go when we wake up for central parts of Newfoundland, back towards western parts of the island, and again likely some snow underway along the Burin Peninsula as well. So your temperatures when we wake up around -2 to -4 eastern into central, a little milder along that south coast where we're going to be flirting with the freezing mark even as of 7 to 8 a.m., -20 to 22 across most of western to central parts of Labrador, a little bit cooler through Cartwright. Now, watch your timeline here as we roll throughout the day. There's that mix over with those southeasterly winds, a little on the gusty side. That will have us mixing over to some of that rain and shower activity for the Avalon, the Burin, even up into the Clarenville, Bonavista, Terra Nova, possibly a little bit of mixing over for a time. While I do think temperatures rise above the freezing mark for central parts of Newfoundland, it's not until really that precip has lifted off to the north. So maybe a very light drizzle possible into the later parts of the day as temperatures get up to around 2 or 3 degrees, but very much all snow event for you folks in central, and of course snow for the west and into Labrador. Just some light snow to flurry action. Happy Valley, Goose Bay back up towards Nain, and a pretty nice day for Labrador City, looking at -16 under a sun and cloud mix. So from 5 degrees in St. John's with those southeasterly winds gusting 70, even 80 kilometers per hour, not out of the question. I think that model, this forecast model, a little bit strong. We cool back down for Friday, and have a look as we take a look at temperatures for Friday. Much cooler, -2 to -5 as those northerly winds return. -21 back on the menu in Labrador City, and we'll talk all about your weekend forecast in just a few minutes. Debbie?
Thank you, Ryan. Well, as we get closer to legalizing marijuana, some people are asking questions about the potential risks of using it recreationally. One question, Is marijuana addictive? Here now's Mark Quinn spoke with an addictions counselor and a woman who says she became addicted to cannabis. CBC has agreed to protect her identity.
Many people think that marijuana is not a problem. You can't get addicted to it. It's nothing. I am living proof that marijuana is addictive. Anything that turns into something you need in order to function is addictive. I needed it to survive. I didn't care how it hurt other people. I didn't care what it was doing to me. That's an addict. This is my problem with legalizing weed. They are going to turn more people into addicts, and it scares me.
The answer is yes, absolutely. Marijuana is an addictive substance. It's a psychoactive substance, and it's the most widely used illicit substance in Canada.
And is it addictive in a way that actually creates withdrawal symptoms for someone who's been using it heavily and then stops using it?
Absolutely. So when we talk about addiction and withdrawal symptoms, typically we talk about psychological withdrawal symptoms or physical withdrawal symptoms. And the research is very clear that folks with marijuana addiction issues can and oftentimes do have both.
What does the science say in terms of alcohol and compared to marijuana? Is marijuana as addictive as alcohol?
Right. So we know that alcohol is the #1 substance used in Canada, and it creates the most harms and addictions related issues of all substances. So with marijuana, we do know that there is a percentage of people, and roughly about 12% of Canadians use marijuana in the past year. Of that 12%, we know that about 9% will potentially develop some type of substance related use disorder connected to the marijuana use.
Remembering Danny King, students at Waterford Valley High pay tribute to their former coach and teacher. Welcome back. He was larger than life, a man who seemed to touch everyone he met. Danny King died suddenly 2 years ago at the age of 44, but the beloved phys ed teacher at Waterford Valley High and longtime rugby player is not forgotten.
I have an MCL tear right here.
Danny King was a powerful man who loved life, and he loved rugby. He played with the Swilers and played with a passion. That's the way it was with powerlifting, too. A fierce competitor, but to those who knew him, a sensitive soul. Today, hundreds gathered at the school to honor King, each with their own reason to remember the man known as DK. Students, rugby friends, and colleagues. And 2 teams of students headed outside for a fitting tribute, the second Memorial Winter Rugby game.
If I blow the whistle, the other team get the ball.
We're allowed to tackle everyone.
No, hands only. This is for a bit of fun, all right? I don't want anybody getting hurt. Danny was a great mentor. He coached me here at the high school first year, and he also coached me that summer past in the Swallows under-18 team. He saw a lot of potential in me, and he really helped me develop that potential. At the start of grade 10, I wasn't as confident as I am now, and I like to credit DK for some of the confidence that he's given me that I've developed. So it's great to see all the people coming together. DK had a special place in all of their hearts.
Danny had a passion for rugby, and he would absolutely love this. And to know that his students are thinking of him and remembering him in such a fitting and fun way. And we are sorrowful in our hearts, but we are also celebrating the life and the impact that Danny has had on his students.
You can see today there's still a lot of interest in rugby and purely linked to his name. So he's had a huge impact in especially the development of players at a young age and attracting players to the game. Like his personality kind of wanted you to be with him, so kids gravitated towards that, and he played a huge influence in a lot of developing rugby careers.
When he passed away 2 years ago, it's definitely left a void in the physical education teacher community. He was a funny guy, and he was fun to work with. So, yeah, I definitely miss that about him.
What would Danny King say about all of this fuss over him today?
He would enjoy it. He liked to be the center of attention. So he'd have a real good time. Wherever he is now, smiling down, he would have enjoyed today for sure.
I wish I'd met him. He seems like he was a great guy. It was so sad, as the principal was saying, that, they are sad today, they're happy, but just 44 years old, he had so much more to contribute.
Absolutely. It has a lasting legacy for sure. Up it goes. The Bank of Canada raises its key lending rate. What that means for you, next.
Time to introduce our young athlete of the day. Xander Harold of Chamberlains is 8 years old and is a member of the Early Stars squash program with CBS Squash Club.
Xander also takes part in the gymnastics program at Campia.
Congratulations, Xander. You're today's young athlete of the day.
The weather update is brought to you by Belltone Hearing Service St. John's, helping the world hear better.
Time to turn our attention once again to the weather. Yesterday, Ryan, you were talking about how cold it was in the southern U.S., surprisingly cold.
Yeah, and the cool down continues. This is the third time in 5 weeks that they've recorded snow in the state of Florida.
Oh.
Yeah, and tonight in places like Sarasota and Orlando, temperatures will dip very near to the freezing mark. There's wind chill advisories in place. So hopefully all you snowbirds packed a winter jacket.
I remember it happened once many years ago and affected all the crops, the oranges.
Well, of course, oranges are a big concern. Hopefully, they get the spray out and can help somewhat. And again, it's more northern Florida that'll be the issue. So anyway, have a look at temperatures right now. 17 in Orlando, but the jet stream is coming through there, and as is the front. And we will see, again, a very chilly night setting up tonight. Oklahoma City and Houston have rebounded somewhat. Of course, it was very cold there 24 hours ago. It's still cool, +1 at Oklahoma, 3 on the plus side at Houston, as 24 hours ago it was -3 there, so you can see where the cold air is lifting out. Now, as we pop on the satellite and radar picture, I want to direct your attention to this big system rolling onto the west coast, and I direct your attention there because it's going to have an impact on us down the road. There's actually 2 pieces of energy that are going to come off this big low. One is a weekend system. It's going to take the shortcut. It's going to rip across most of Canada and bring light snowfall. The second is going to be diving south, and that will become a midweek system. It's going to drop south. It'll grab some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and it'll come up with, again, more moisture with it. That'll be for mid next week, and we'll talk about that and how things are going to play out here with your long-range forecast. First, our snapshot for tonight and Tuesday, talking about 10 centimeters or more for a good portion of the island tonight. 10 to 15, pretty good chance through central parts of Newfoundland, and 15 to as much as 20 looking possible for the southwest coast. Again, closer to 5 to as much as 10 centimeters for Corner Brook. I think you're probably closer to 10 based on what I'm seeing right now. And snow will just be a trace across the Burin and the Avalon Peninsulas to as much as 2 centimeters towards places like Clarenville, Bonavista. And that is because, again, not really getting into much of that snow zone at all. It's mainly shower and drizzle activity into the afternoon. 5 on the plus side. Light snow up through southeastern parts of Labrador. Very quiet through Labrador City and over the next 24 hours as an area of high pressure moves in. There's Friday. Some onshore flurries will come to an end along the west coast. I think we'll see some sunshine in the mix for central and east on Friday. Here's your weekend system. It's a very quick mover, a bit of a clipper, and into Saturday afternoon, we will see that snow pushing in from west to east. It's a late day arrival for the Avalon, but if you do have travel plans on Saturday, be prepared that we will see that system shooting through into Sunday. Things clearing out, some lingering flurries. We may even see, as you saw there briefly, just perhaps a little bit of a mix over for the Burin and the Avalon Peninsulas overnight Saturday into Sunday, southern sections. That's something I'll be watching over the next day or so. So watch this, a bit of a cool down into early next week. Forecast models on board then for a very western track with this next system coming in for mid next week. And that is, yes, another warm-up on the menu. So as we take a look at that 7-day trend, that is another plus side temp for mid next week. So the yo-yo continues, the roller coaster ride of temperatures where we're warm, we're cool, and then back with a mild push possibly for mid next week. Again, still 7 days out, but we'll keep you posted. And that snow possible for the weekend, so do keep that in mind across the island. Into Labrador, again, some light flurries tomorrow. Saturday into Sunday, some accumulation, but fairly light, and then keeping an eye on that midweek system for snow for you folks next week. That's your forecast to now.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, turning now to some national news. The Bank of Canada raised its trend-setting interest today from 1% to 1.25. The bank's statement says the move was prompted by continued strong economic numbers.
The data that we have received since last October have been generally stronger than expected. Growth around the world continues to strengthen and broaden, supporting the expansion here at home.
Today's statement cited strong consumption, investment, and employment numbers. It's the bank's third hike since July, and it says there could be more, but it stresses several factors are now uncertain, chief among them the ultimate results of the NAFTA negotiations. It also says it will closely monitor the economy's response to the higher borrowing rates.
Global Affairs Canada says it's trying to gather more information about reports of 2 Canadians being kidnapped in Nigeria. Consular officials are in touch with local authorities. 2 Americans are also reported to have been kidnapped. A Nigerian spokesman says 2 police officers who were escorting the Canadians and Americans were killed in a gun battle with the kidnappers. The ambush by unknown gunmen took place in the northern state of Kaduna. It reportedly happened as the Canadians and Americans were making their way to the capital, Abuja.
Canadian researchers are raising new doubts about one of the most commonly prescribed drugs for pregnant women. For decades, diclectin has been the go-to treatment for morning sickness and nausea, but a reanalysis of the clinical trial suggests the drug, while not harmful, may actually do nothing at all. Health reporter Vicadopia has more.
Jenna Colucci is among the 35 million women who've taken diclectin for severe nausea, but it didn't help.
I still was nauseous. I remember I was vomiting.
This family doctor has long questioned whether diclectin actually does anything. His research team spent years trying to obtain clinical trial documents held by Health Canada. After signing a confidentiality agreement to look at the raw numbers in the 9,000-page study, he says the evidence the drug works better than a placebo is slim to almost none, and the manufacturer knew it.
Now I can't bring myself to write a prescription for this medication knowing what I know about it. It just doesn't seem to be effective at all.
Prasad is not alone. Although the FDA approved the drug in 2013, it noted it has a small treatment effect. European regulators said it does not represent a significant therapeutic benefit over existing treatments. And a recent review by Health Canada found the research to back the drug was problematic and not definitive. And other doctors are starting to question it. The Journal for the Family Physicians of Canada agrees there's no strong evidence the drug works, but the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists continues to recommend diclectin because it's considered safe, since it's actually a combination of vitamin B6 and an antihistamine found in common remedies such as NyQuil.
There's nothing magical other than that they are formulated in this way where it delivers medication slowly over time. But no, these are 2 medications that are available over the counter on their own.
As for Colucci, the symptoms eventually disappeared on their own. Vicadopia, CBC News, Bradford, Ontario.
Our viewer picture of the day is a beauty, and this one, any guesses where it might be?
Somewhere where there's lots of snow.
Yeah, that's a
so
good
West
clue.
Coast or beyond, up to Labrador.
Yeah, it is in Labrador, and we'll let you know exactly where coming up after the break.
It's pretty.
Welcome back to Here and Now. Well, if the winter weather has got you down and you've made all the snowmen you can possibly make, here's one way to keep busy.
Take a look at that snow-covered car. Well, that's actually carved out of snow. Montreal artist Simon Leprise dreamt it up to prank removal crews.
And it worked. No word on whether they eventually carted it away, but the police did cruise by to check it out and left a ticket that said, "You made our night." Few laughs there for sure.
You might as well laugh. So if you think it's cold here, just imagine what it's like in Siberia.
Oh my goodness. Oh. It is so cold there. The public thermometer in this remote Siberian village broke just after it registered a reading of minus 62 degrees Celsius.
Oh my, some locals reported seeing the temperature dip as low as minus 67 on personal thermometers. The Yakutia region is known as the coldest inhabited place on Earth. Oh. So that's what the threat is. We'll send you to Siberia.
Yeah.
Makes me appreciate it here.
And we thought Labrador City was cold, where this picture was taken. And thanks to Brandon Clark, a great picture of a sundog. Of course, it needs to be very cold to capture this. Ice crystals, very fine ones in the atmosphere. The sun shines through and makes that effect. And great capture of that thanks to Brandon Clark for the picture.
I've never heard of a sundog.
Sundog.
Interesting.
It's beautiful.
Thanks everyone for being with us. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.